Can't have that. That's not fair.
Oh, yeah.
He's coming back, though. So by the time
And Wes Welker. We'll give you Wes Welker back, too.
I think I would probably take New England at this point, only because Brady at this stage between those two quarterbacks. I like Brady's what he is able to do when LeGarrette Blount is on that roster. I think it makes that offense a little more diverse, and for Bill Belichick to have pulled Deion Lewis off the scrap heap and turned him into sort of a Kevin Falk type, I think that's when New England has been at its best offensively in the past, when they've had that strong running game. And like I said, you're going to get a piece back in Brandon LaFell down the line. Defensively, there's still work to be done, but I don't think that's any different than Green Bay. I think Green Bay's got its own.
If I can respectfully disagree with you, the Packers have Eddie Lacy. I'd rather, when he's healthy, and he was back last night, I'd rather have him than Blunt. Aaron Rodgers can run. Tom Brady can't. Aaron Rodgers can run out of that, can throw like for all day long like he did last night. The Packers don't have, the Patriots don't have anybody like Matthews. Matthews is a great player. And I think the receiving core of the Packers is better. So I would respectfully disagree with you. If on a neutral field today, if they were playing, they've both been dominant, I would take the Packers. I think they played better.
The problem, though, Woody, Matthews is playing – when he's inside like that, I don't think that is the best. And I don't think Clay Matthews believes that's the best possible use of a Clay Matthews. And when they play the Patriots, Clay Matthews is going to have to be a pass rusher. They're not going to have the luxury of leaving him inside like that to protect against the run. They've got to get to Tom Brady. And to me, when you remove him from the middle of that defense, and I think their coaching staff would agree, and that's why he plays so many snaps inside now, it significantly softens the middle of that defense. They have issues when Clay Matthews has to be primarily a pass rusher in their defense, which is why he's folded inside so much. So I think, look, if they can't get to Brady, they're going to have some really significant problems. And I think the Patriots can scheme to control a game like that with that running game. And, I'm not confident that once you move Clay Matthews back outside that they can continue to stop the run, particularly the way they did against Kansas City.
Yeah, well, I would, and we could debate this question again in probably January 28th, Charles,
sure.
And say, they're playing in a field in San Francisco. Who do you like then? But the one thing you didn't bring up, which Les agreed with you earlier in the program, we were kind of debating this, that Bill Belichick's a better coach than Mike McCarthy. And I would say that Josh McDaniels is a better offensive coordinator than Tom Clements, who's just taken over the job. And so I would give them an edge based on those two guys too. If
you left out Tom Brady.
No, I'm talking about, we've already talked about Tom Brady.
Okay.
We've talked about all the other stuff. I'm just adding that if I were Charles, I'd bring up Bill Belichick's a better coach than Mike McCarthy. Although Mike McCarthy, I think, is 1-0 in Super Bowls. He's undefeated, and Bill Belichick's not undefeated in Super Bowls. We'll now get away from the hypothetical questions since they're not playing each other, but we'll discuss that probably again. Is that a Super Bowl? Never mind. It's too early to tell, but I think that's a Super Bowl we'd all like to see, wouldn't we, Charles?
I'd love to see that Super Bowl. Like you said, we're a long way from there, and there are plenty of injuries that are going to happen between now and then. But I think when you look at those two, when you look at the AFC and the NFC, those are the two teams that I want to watch right now, at least until if Dallas can hold it together, get it together, and get healthy again by the end of the season, or Seattle can finally click offensively and get back to where they were defensively with Cam Chancellor back on the field. Until then,
is it possible we're sitting here talking about the two teams? Are we not talking about the best team in the league, and that would be Arizona? Charles, where would you put Arizona? Or are we still having to wait around and see what Carson Palmer and the Cardinals actually become?
I think that's it. I think it's Carson Palmer. It's just such a different team when Carson Palmer's healthy versus when he's not. And I think that's what they're on pins and needles, and that's there was all the furor about how long they kept Carson Palmer in that blowout. because you're just so scared. Can this guy make it through an entire season? And offensively, they're just they're a totally different team when he's there. But they've added the backfield. They went into the offseason really wanting to solve the backfield. I think they gave some consideration to possibly making a run at Adrian Peterson, and then just decided that we can do this in the draft. We can do it by picking up maybe some spare parts and Chris Johnson when we get closer to the season. And I think that's created more of the kind of rotation they can use in that offense in the backfield. Nobody knows who John Brown is, but he's probably the best number 2 receiver other than maybe Emmanuel Sanders out there. And defensively, they haven't missed a beat, and that was surprising because I thought losing Todd Bowles, I thought that would change quite a bit for them defensively. But they're fantastic, and they're underrated, though, because, we've got to see them play. They've got to beat Seattle. We've got to see them beat Seattle, and we have to see Carson Palmer stay upright for more than half a season.
Hey, Charles, we know Indianapolis is 1-2, but we also know they have Andrew Luck at quarterback, and we also know they're in a really bad division, and chances are they're going to be in the playoffs. The question is, are they a Super Bowl contender? Do the Colts have enough?
They just reshuffled that offensive line. I think we got to see it for a couple of games before we decide. I don't know why they haven't brought Ahmad Bradshaw back in. I think that they lack a little bit of the toughness that he brought to that offense last year before he went down for the season. And even though Frank Gore's a pretty tough runner there, I think Bradshaw coming out of the backfield was really more of a safety valve for Andrew Luck last season when he was healthy. That I think people have just forgotten about that, and it's surprising to me that they haven't dipped back, into that well and brought Bradshaw back in. But offensively, I think if that line stays together, they can get better. But again, when Andrew Luck stands up there and says part of this is my fault, there's credence to that. He's making some throws that suggest to me that he still is not a very good quarterback when he gets hit and knocked around. Not to say many quarterbacks are. Maybe other than Ben Roethlisberger, there's not a great many quarterbacks in the NFL who can deal with that and be a better player. But, are they going to be a playoff team? I agree with you. Someone's got to win that division. And I tend to look at them as being the team that can put it together down the stretch. They're definitely the most talented, I think, in that division. But as far as where they go in the playoffs, I don't know. I don't know how you look at Denver and say that, people are finding all these faults with Denver, but I don't know how you look at Indianapolis and think that's a team that could be any better. And to me, I just look at New England. They're head and shoulders above everyone else, and then you've got a lot of these teams with a lot of significant flaws that they have to work out by the end of the season.
Well, you brought up the Broncos. Let's get around to that since we're here. And I just mentioned, it's funny you brought up Bradshaw because I couldn't understand why the Colts, they brought him in. I thought they were going to sign him, but I mentioned him as a possibility for the Broncos. He's just sitting out there. He and Pierre Thomas that are two guys that I think could help a lot of teams. Your suspicions about the Broncos, have they changed at all after Sunday night, or are they still, forgive me, but to quote an old Arizona coach, are the Broncos what they are, or have they finally figured out what they're supposed to do with Peyton Manning, and that's not put him under center?
I think that, you bring up the center thing. That to me is the adjustment that had to be made. There's just, you can't. He's not historically been a quarterback who can turn his back on the line of scrimmage. Just in terms of what he likes to do pre-snap, it's the reality. He wants to diagnose the defense. He wants to see what's in front of him, and then watch how that plays out. And as that snap is kicked off, so to me, making that adjustment was huge. I don't know that they can run the ball any better. This whole idea of the check with me run plays and all this, you have to block to run the ball, and I just don't know that line in the state that it's in is tough enough to get that done consistently, particularly against teams that can actually stop the run, that are going to present a unified front. I think defensively they're amazing. They're going to rack up a zillion sacks this season, and they're going to knock around a lot of quarterbacks. Is that going to ultimately be enough? We'll see. I mean, Peyton's got to be. I agree with Chris Collinsworth. I watched part of that last game, and he talked about he's got to when he's getting one or two steps into these throws, he can still put that ball downfield. I agree with that, but at the same time, you're not going to play a guy like Darius Slay who's going to let not only Demaryius Thomas pluck a ball over his head, but also Emmanuel Sanders. You're not going to play secondaries that poor when you get to the postseason. So I want to see them play. They're going to play Green Bay. I want to see that game. I want to see how they look. And then obviously they've got the Patriots. The month of November is going to tell you what this Broncos team's going to be. If they cannot put up a real game against those two teams, I don't know how we can expect a lot out of the playoffs.
Charles, there are still quite a few 3-0 teams in this league. Woody and I were talking earlier. Of the undefeated teams, who do you think is the biggest pretender?
What did you guys say? I'm curious.
Well, I said Carolina.
I thought you liked Carolina. Well, I'm not convinced about the Atlanta Falcons because Dan Quinn, I think, should have been a head coach a couple of years ago after the first Super Bowl. And he's done I think, a miraculous job in taking a terrible defense and making it at least mediocre. And Flynn's back on board. They found him a running back, and they've got one of the best wide receivers in the league, if not the best wide receiver in the league. But it's going to be odd. I thought Carolina. I thought you were saying Atlanta because I thought Carolina. I'm not sold on Carolina. I didn't even think they were 3-0, Charles. I'll tell you the truth. I thought they were 2-1.
I think a lot of people don't realize Carolina's 3-0.
I think a lot of people don't realize they're in the league.
I will plead stupidity, but I think I'm with other people. I assume they were like 2-1. Surely they had lost to somebody, but
two teams in the NFC South.
And all I know is Cam Newton's wearing a camouflaged suit and complaining about Hockley not giving him the respect he deserves, but
we don't even know if that's true now. I would say this out of those, that's the two I would have probably picked out. The thing that particularly about Carolina that bothers me is I don't see the consistency in terms of when you get into the second half of the season. Everyone's sort of had that template to find out what your weaknesses are. Really, after the first 4 games, I don't know who Cam's going to throw to when they figure, because right now it's just a bunch of possession guys.
Right.
Evan Funchess isn't developing, and that run game, I'm not excited about Jonathan Stewart. I'm just not, and I don't know if they can score points defensively. They'll be a solid team. Ron Rivera's always managed. Even last season when they had no Greg Hardy, he managed to scrape together some solid defensive performances. But I just don't know how they're going to score down the stretch. And Cam tends to get banged up in situations like that when they can start to shut down possession guys. I mean, they just have to solve Greg Olsen at this point. Takes away a huge weapon, and Cam gets banged around, and it changes things. So, I out of those two, if you had to say, which one's the weaker, I think it's Carolina. I'm with you guys on Atlanta. I think Dan Quinn's done a really good job. When you take a team that has been trailing 3 times, and won all 3 of those games, I think he's instilled some fight in that team that was lost a little bit under Mike Smith as that message went stale under Mike Smith. So, Atlanta's, I think, pointing in the right direction, and offensively they're going to give people problems if everybody's healthy, at least they can score. But I don't think Carolina can.
Final question if I ask you, what is the most shocking thing that's happened to you other than we've sort of forgotten about Deflategate finally? It seems like we've moved on from Deflategate, that Tom Brady has got revenge on his mind and hatred in his heart. But when you think of the league, and I'm giving you time, I'm making this question long, what's the one thing you went, boy, I would have never guessed that?
I saw the Kansas City Chiefs a couple of times in preseason, and I saw them in mini camps. I didn't think that they would be this poor. I think they beat a poor Houston team to open the season. I thought Kansas City was going to be a heck of a lot better in that division. And offensively, I did not. I thought Alex Smith was ready to take a little step forward, and instead it's almost been the opposite. It's, if he's not throwing to Jamal Charles, if he's not throwing to Travis Kelce, for Jeremy Maclin to be signed for $11 million and to be really the third option for him is disappointing, and I think that they're very disappointed at how things have turned out with that line. They're a very talented team, a very poor offensive line, and a quarterback who does not like contact, and it creates a lot of problems. So I think, as bad as they've looked at times, that has surprised me. And I will say this: you brought up Tom Brady. I was wrong about Tom Brady, because everybody who said, this will be just like Spygate, and they come out of that and he'll be blazing and he's so focused. I looked at the offensive pieces and I said, I don't know how he could do that. I just don't see it happening. and yet, you know, look what he's done. I mean, Gronkowski's been amazing. Edelman, I always discount Bill Belichick's ability to find another offensive piece, a guy like Deion Lewis. So I was definitely wrong about that as well.
Well, and I would just add, that's why I kind of question the Broncos a lot more than other people do. Because, yes, the defense is playing well, but it's playing against lousy offenses. But the Baltimore Ravens have turned out to be average, and Kansas City's turned out to be average. And we found out that Detroit's not a playoff team anymore. They're just back to being a garbage team. So that's why I think when you brought up the Broncos in November, when they have to go to Indianapolis, we think the Colts, and Les said it earlier, the Colts are kind of getting it back together, at least they did in the fourth quarter. And the Patriots and the Packers, we're going to find out whether the Broncos can actually play with the big boys or not.
Definitely. And, you know, it's funny you bring up Baltimore. I'll say this, man, about the Ravens. When I went there and I saw them in the preseason, I spent some time in that locker room, I realized while I was standing there, Steve Smith's the strongest guy in that locker room now. There's no more Ray Lewis. There's no more Ed Reed. There's no more Haloti Ngata. And now with Suggs going down, that's scary for a team like that, where their culture, so much of what they were, was the toughness of those defensive guys. They set that tone in that locker room. And Baltimore, that's a real 0-3. They are going to struggle. It's a tough spot for them. They've lost a lot from the leadership standpoint inside that locker.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Charles. Charles, what's your Twitter handle?
Just my name, at Charles Robinson.
That's easy, at Charles Robinson, and you can read him at Yahoo Sports. Charles, thanks, man.
And we hope you'll come back before the Pats and the Pack do play. That would
Absolutely.
We'll have that discussion again. Yeah.
Woody's got him going to the Super Bowl already. That's Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports, and all of our guests are brought to you by Papa John's. Better ingredients, better pizza. Papa John's.